If you're tired of feeling like the only way to grow is through more cold leads and chasing visibility, this episode is for you. The other day, I opened my LinkedIn inbox and counted 7 cold pitches waiting for me, all pretending to be personalized, all ignored. And it hit me. This is exactly why growth feels harder right now. Cold outreach isn't just ineffective, it's actually widening the trust gap, even for the agencies who don't use it. Buyers have become so skeptical that starting from cold automatically lengthens the sales cycle. So what is working? Well, it's building and nurturing real relationships, following up, collaborating instead of pitching, and investing in trust before you need it. That's why I invited Dan Englander, founder of Sales Schema, to the podcast. Both of us work in the agency space and believe that trust drives sustainable growth, but we approach it from 2 different angles. In this episode, we talk about how cold outreach is widening the trust gap and what to do instead. We also explore how agencies are turning referrals into something intentional, not random, and why founders still need to stay involved in relationship building, plus how specialization shortens the path to trust. If you want to grow through meaningful introductions, mutual support, and real relationships, not through cold lead chasing, this conversation is for you. Welcome to the Small But Mighty Agency Podcast. If you want to grow an agency to 7 figures and beyond without working more hours in your business, you're in the right place. I'm your host, Audrey Joy Kwan. I know what it takes to build an agency, including supporting an agency owner in selling and exiting. I also have a master's degree in communications, specializing in organizational development. My team and I have worked behind the scenes of multiple 7-figure agencies and have coached and consulted with over 150 agency owners. All this to say, when you join us on the Small But Mighty Agency Podcast, you get real-world experience and practical tips that help you work less, earn more, and lead with integrity. So let's go. Hey friends, today on the podcast, I'm chatting with Dan Englander. He's the founder of Sales Schema and the author of Relationship Sales at Scale. Now, Dan and I both work in the world of helping agencies grow through trust-based relationships. So you could say we swim in similar waters, but that's exactly why I wanted to have this conversation. We take different approaches, but we care about the same big questions. How do you grow without spamming people? How do you build real trust at scale? And how do you create systems that help you stay consistent even when you're busy? In this episode, we dig into how Dan blends personalized outreach with scalable processes, what he's learned from running sales campaigns, and how agencies can connect with the right prospects without burning out. It's a thoughtful look at sales growth in a skeptical market. And whether you're an agency owner, a strategist, or someone trying to grow through deeper relationships, I think you'll take away something useful. Let's get into it. Hi, Dan. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, Audrey, and appreciate the great intro. It's better than I normally do, so thanks.
Great. Hey, let's start with your story. Now, you've worked on many outreach campaigns. What patterns kept showing up that led you to write Relationship Sales at Scale?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think probably a few. The biggest one, which I and many others talk about a lot, is how we've moved into this situation where trust has become the scarce resource when before it was something like information or just knowledge about a product or a service. I think closely tied to that, another pattern is the fact that the vast majority of sales advice, the lens through which we're seeing how to approach outreach and sales and prospecting, is really heavily influenced by software and other transactional products. So I didn't really see many great models that were focused on complex services. Where these things tie together is that with a complex service, such as an agency service, trust is an even bigger factor, right? Because people don't get to experience the value of what you deliver until weeks or months after they've bought. Versus, a software product or something like that, it's a what you see is what you get situation. It's based on infinite scale, mass outreach. Hey, do you have like here's the very specific solution to your problem, as opposed to, can I even trust this person to have a 30-minute conversation with? So I think that this trend is just intensified with AI and with noise and with more direct, indirect competition and so on. And those are the main things that have kind of informed this. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. I think you and I are on the same page when we use the phrase trust is a new currency, although it's not a new currency, it's always been there. It's just become more and more at the forefront because of the new technologies that are showing up in the agency owner space. Creating that trust in the front end is something that we need to focus more on, because people are going to want to see they are working with people and not some AI output. And so let's get into talking more about what's inside your book. Now, your book really talks about finding this middle ground between old school personalization and new school automation. And I think a lot of agencies really struggle here. So from your experience, what does personalization at scale actually look like?
Yeah, and I'd even go a step further to say personalization is great. We do a lot of it, but everybody's doing personalization. And if anything, there's this onslaught of it with AI. And usually, what personalization looks like is, hey, I'm going to find this piece of publicly available data about you, and I'm going to regurgitate it back to you. And because of that, all of our BS detectors are going up. Our walls are getting higher. I had an agency owner the other day that was doing handwritten emails, like researching a prospect, saying, hey, we have all these different things that we noticed about you and reasons why we'd be a fit. And we both had the same concern, which is like, even though you guys are doing the work, there's no way for somebody to differentiate that from an AI tool. So what is the answer? Like, really, what does it look like? And it's not a lot different than what many or most agencies have done to build up their pipelines. It's looking for areas where you already have trust. So what does that mean? Well, referrals and doing those a lot better and more proactively, and actually having a system for asking for specific intros, which I can get more into. And then the other is personalization, but it's a step above that, and it's actually getting into commonalities. So like, who are the prospects that would talk to me based on something I have in common with them on a business or personal level? So what's cool about that is it's actually not infinitely scalable, because each commonality is inherently scarce, but that's also the thing that's going to make it work in a very skeptical, low trust environment like we're in right now.
Yeah, you mentioned a keyword, which is referrals. And I have a community called Agency Together, and we all come together for the purpose of connection, collaboration, and what I call building referral ready relationships. What we're really talking about is access to more warm connections and warm relationships. And when we are introduced to someone, we shorten the sales cycle. We have an opportunity to get in the door faster rather than the cold outreach that we see a lot of agency owners have been doing. And I know you and I have touched base on that quite a bit about how do we make sure the sales cycle is shorter? How do we leverage our community and our friends to support us and work together to get those introductions? And I know you have some insight on that. I'd love to hear what's been really working for you on that end.
I think the first is the referral angle, and that's probably the most important starting place, just because that is the thing that has worked and will continue to work almost no matter what, right? And I think it's funny because a lot of agencies, for years, agencies said to us, like, we get all of our business from referrals. And then for a long time, we would just get them off and running with outbound, and we just sort of like put the referrals on a table or on a shelf or whatever. And we've moved away from that and moved towards helping agencies do it better. To frame that out a little bit, I think the reason that referrals aren't all they can be is because people are treating them reactively, right? It's like, you might have a happy client. You say, do you know anyone? You might go to a conference and event and say, do you know anyone? If you do it better, you might say, do you know anyone who meets the specific criteria? The problem with that is it creates so much work for the other person, even if they really want to help you, because they've got to understand your offering, know their Rolodex. They have to make these connections happen. They have to write the email, and they're busy and they're running their own businesses or doing whatever they do. So really what we've developed is a system for doing it a lot better there's a few steps involved, but essentially pre-identifying the people you would ask. So you're not like pressured to ask somebody you A, don't know, or B, wouldn't feel comfortable asking. So you have this list, and then figuring out of that group who they are connected to and the accounts you want to reach, and then having very direct, honest, tasteful conversations. So you're like, hey, do you actually know this person? Would you be willing to help me out? And it's very direct. And I think with that, then you're getting from this position of, do you know anyone, to a task that somebody can easily complete, right? So it's not fully automated because relationships are complicated. It does take work, but it's leveraged, right? And it's a much better use of time than writing a custom email to one prospect at a time, or dialing for dollars like people used to do and some people still do, and so on. So that's kind of how we're thinking about referrals. I'll pause there. I know you asked about sales cycles and a couple other things, but
That's a great start. I think what you're pointing to is circles of influence and looking at who is the circle around you that you want to serve and reaching out and seeing if there's a common ground for you to exchange collaborations, connections, and referrals. I call it building the circle of trust. It really is looking at the people around you who might feel the same way about leveraging connections with each other and having conversations with these people and seeing, hey, if I serve this type of audience and you serve that type of audience, can we collaborate in any way? Is there someone you would like to meet? Is there someone that I can introduce you to? It's those types of conversations that really get the referrals going. And being someone who really champions that, like I do, what do you think really works and what do you think doesn't work in that type of approach?
yeah, so I think what doesn't work is the open-ended, hey, like, do you know anybody that can help? Or do you know anybody, even do you know anybody that fits this criteria? Because it just becomes this, to us, the person asking, it seems simple. To the person receiving that question, it's a ton of work for them to go figure that out and to make those connections. So the game changer is getting to a place where you say, do you actually know the specific person you're connected to? And would you feel comfortable with an intro? So it's no pressure. It's completely, low pressure. If they don't know or they just don't feel comfortable with it, that's totally fine. But you're creating this process where you're making it easy for somebody to help you, somebody that already likes and trusts you and is able to help. So that's the main thing. I can definitely talk about direct outreach. I think that for most agencies, the referral approach is the better starting place if they're thinking about getting proactive and building, this repeatable system. Yeah.
What I've seen, especially inside Agency Together, is when agency owners who are collaborating with other agency owners, they have some time to really get to know and learn about each other. It is important when you're referring someone to have a understanding of the work that person does, but also a trust in how they deliver. And the other thing you mentioned, the more general you are in the ask, the harder it is. One of the key things we found is being really specific. So if you are looking for someone in a very specific industry, it's actually easier to make that ask. It's easier to look at each other's networks and identify someone who you can introduce that person to. I think the hardest thing that I've come across is someone coming to me and saying, hey, do you know a business that is 5 million plus? Well, that could be anyone, right? But it'd be so much more powerful when people come to you and are specific.
Yeah, I mean, back to what I mentioned, I think it's going even a step further and saying, like, literally this person. When we have clients do this, we have them literally share the screen of the search results of all the people that they want to meet, and not expecting to get dozens of intros, but saying like, hey, there are 2 or 3 people here that A, you would know, and B, you'd be open to introducing me to. And then we have scripts and templates for this to make that introduction happen that completely de-risks it for the connector as well as the person getting on the call. I think a lot of the times, like, people's fear is like, oh, I'm going to loop my friend into a sales pitch, or they're going to have their time wasted. So really positioning it as like, hey, I'm introducing you to a future resource. This is somebody that you should know, because they're going to be able to help you. So I think that's the first thing. The second thing is like, yeah, communities like yours are golden for building this trust and for getting people in touch with all these resources. For like a busy owner, a lot of the times there's so many inputs and there's so many of these circles of influence. They have their happy clients over here. They have people they know from the conference world over there. They have like 2 or 3 Slack communities that they're in. And what's cool about this is it's just syncing all of that together, right? So it's like batching up, hey, let me look at everybody that I know and figure out like who would I actually ask for a referral? So all the inputs get pulled in via LinkedIn. That's the best way.
Okay, great. So we're talking about LinkedIn here specifically and the openness to pull up our LinkedIn profiles and take a quick look at it together. And is there anyone here that you might think is a great opportunity for you? Let me connect you. So I think that really it's tactical. It's easy to communicate to someone who's on the same page and wanting to leverage connections. Is that how you've positioned it with the people you've worked with, which is an opportunity to use a platform like LinkedIn to leverage each other's connections?
The main thing is that a lot of the gold has already sort of been dug up and it's just strewn throughout the house, right? And it's like buried under like clothes and stuff. So a lot of this stuff is already there. And also, like, I think people might be listening to this and they're like, hey, this is great. Like, I do have these little pockets of opportunity and people that trust me and can help me, but it's not going to last forever. And that is true. Like, you might have like 3 months, 6 months worth of this. But the fact is, you're going to be meeting people continuously just in the course of day-to-day business, and you're going to be adding to it. So if you have this system and frankly the habit of building connections this way, it's going to keep paying off. Like, we have a client that's like, can I do this when I have a happy client? And it's like, absolutely. You have a client that's happy, that's like, hey, great job on the project. Well, most people would just say, hey, do you know anybody else we could help? And then the client says, yeah, let me go away and think about it. And then maybe half the time they come up with a referral or less, versus like, hey, here's a few people I saw you might know. Like, let me know if you're open to making the connection. Here's a script to help you make the connection, and so on. A lot of the times, like, and I used to do this too when I was working in an agency, is like, we assume, oh, they didn't make the referral because they don't like us or there's something going wrong. But really, they're just busy and it's hard. So it's like getting over that is a huge part of the battle. Yeah.
It's about making things easier for the other person. The easiest thing you can do is to say to someone, hey, it looks like you know so-and-so. Would you be open to that connection? And then one step further is providing that template or that email so that they don't have to do the thinking. Okay, this leads into my next thought here. One of the biggest issues for small agencies is staying consistent with sales efforts, especially when they're doing great client work and they're super busy and they tend to lean back into what they're most comfortable with as a small agency founder, which is back into the work. And they tend to leave the sales behind. How do you think agency owners can stay more consistent in their sales efforts?
I think the biggest one is sort of a sense of identity and a sort of a sense of your motivation and the why behind it. The fact is, a lot of the times where people go wrong, it's like, well, I don't like sales, so I'm going to hire somebody else to do it. I'll go hire a salesperson. But what they don't realize is, like, they're not hiring somebody to do sales. What they're asking is somebody to go build them this system for getting leads and for generating demand, which is not realistic. Like, the idea of like building the system that is going to get people coming to you in a way that's repeatable is a very entrepreneurial task. It's something others can help you with, like we do and you do, but it's ultimately going to be something that 9 times out of 10 owners are going to have to do. A metaphor that we have is, don't hire the driver before you have the car. Otherwise, you're going to hire a driver. They're going to sit on their hands for 6 months. You're going to spend 6 figures and be very unhappy, and then blame everything on that salesperson who would have been successful in a situation where they had a system and had a car. So a lot of it is just like owning the fact that, okay, my job is to build these systems. I'm going to be in the sales seat, and getting as much client work, ops stuff off your plate as possible so that you can own that function and not looking to get it off your plate too early. So once you've sort of taken ownership over being in that sales seat and really building these systems, because it's like, it's going to be different than just relying on organic referrals or RFPs or whatever. What that involves then is thinking about the projects in terms of direct and indirect control. So what does that mean? If we're thinking about indirect control, it's basically stuff that's pretty scaled out. Examples are going to include like leveraged outbound. Maybe you're running ad campaigns. Maybe you're doing SEO. It's stuff where there's a lot of potential upside, where you're getting in front of a lot more people, but there's also more variables. Like, hey, it's not working. Maybe it's the market or ad costs or deliverability or whatever. And you're doing these little guess and check experiments, but there's a bigger amount of time and a longer feedback loop between what you're doing, the inputs and the outputs. So ideally, the way to split this up as the owner is having one indirect control project like that, and then another direct control project. What does that mean? In a previous era, this was dialing for dollars. Like, hey, if I make 20 calls, I know I get 2 meetings and I get 1 proposal out of it, right? What I recommend, or rather what we've seen work better for most agencies, let me frame that out a little bit, is that referral engine concept. The idea of, I'm going to spend this amount of time talking to this many people to get this many referrals. So it's somewhere where you have a very tight feedback loop, and you know that if I put in these inputs, I get those outputs. So it's not always fun. It takes consistent time and energy, but it also is much more predictable. So that's kind of how we're thinking about dividing up the work.
I like the way you've just positioned the strategies in terms of these boxes, which is an indirect control and then the direct control. And you've placed the referrals into direct control because there is more of you involved in it, but also a better ability for you to figure out how much you can do to create outcome. So what do I mean by that? I think this blends well into the talk about metrics. So usually when we're talking about sales, we want to attribute metrics to sales. And in the world of referrals, those metrics also matter. So let's say, for example, in order to get a client, we need to have 3 sales calls. So really, when you're doing the referrals and direct control, you're trying to get 10 people into a discovery call, thinking that 10 might turn into 3 sales calls and 3 becomes 1. So in that way, that's direct control because you can still control those numbers. Now, is that a good way to put it? Or would you look at it differently when you say direct control?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. You have more predictability over those numbers. Now, we never have total predictability, right? Because we live in an uncertain world, but you have a tighter feedback loop, right? So and by the way, referrals aren't the only thing that would fall under direct control. Maybe you go to trade shows and you're like, hey, if I go to 2 trade shows, I get a deal out of it or something like that. It's somewhere where you have this real feel for the glucose and the energy produces this kind of outcome. That can and will happen within direct projects as well. But if you're building those in the early days, you might not have that barometer yet. Sort of like when you go to the doctor, like they'll just say, here are what your levels should be. They get a baseline first and then say, based on this, you need to get this improvement kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. I'm really engaged right now in this idea of talking about direct control because I think a lot of people look at referrals and think there is no control over referrals. They think, okay, referrals are very much random. That's the understanding when we talk to agency owners. And I think that there is an opportunity to understand how to make referrals not random. And when it comes down to it, it's a matter of understanding what type of relation work needs to be done to build up those calls, discovery calls, and then an understanding of how to drive those discovery calls into sales calls, and then how to drive the sales calls into becoming a client. So asking for referrals oftentimes isn't just about, hey, you referred me someone and that person becomes a client right away. What we need to do is think about, hey, when we ask someone for a referral, that might be more top of the funnel where we're just in that discovery. So how many referrals do we need to ask for? How many discoveries do we need to have that leads to sales conversations, that leads to client? I think that is a little bit different way of thinking about it because when we think about referrals, traditionally, the thought is if someone gives me a referral, it should automatically convert into a client.
Right. And this is a big reframe that's going to be necessary if the agency owner is serious about building a repeatable system and frankly getting out of the sales seat, selling the agency for a good multiple. It's going to take accepting that you're only seeing a fraction of your sales cycle if you're used to inbound warm referrals, right? So you're going to deal with a longer sales cycle, you're going to deal with lower close rates. That's just kind of part of the game if you want to build something that is more repeatable, and it's going to involve talking to a lot more people and probably kissing more frogs in order to convert, right? So it just depends on what you want to build.
Just coming back full circle to this idea of trust, the reason why we're talking about having referrals as part of the sales strategy is because of trust being deteriorated. In our economy, in our market, trust is deteriorated because of all the things that are happening out there, including, of course, AI. And the fastest path to closing that deterioration of trust is getting that introduction. But that introduction in itself may not translate immediately to a client. So this idea that referral to client right away, that in itself is disappearing because you still have to be out there when someone introduces you to building that relationship. And that's taking more time as well, too, just because of all the noise that is truly out there in our market right now.
Yeah, exactly. Every so often, I'll get on a call with an agency owner and they'll be like, we want to talk to people that are ready to buy right now. It happens less often because people see my content more and more. But what I usually say is like, okay, like great. So first off, that's going to be a tiny fraction of the market. It's usually like 3%. And that 3%, like maybe if you do everything perfectly, they'll talk to you. But they're unlikely to buy from you just because guess who they're going to do business with? The agency that they know, like, and trust that probably built the relationship weeks, months, or even years prior. So now you're back at square one again. So it's like, you're dealing with and then that problem becomes worse as agencies specialize and their markets get smaller, which also makes everything easier and better. That's a whole other topic, but that's what we're typically seeing. Yeah.
Now, anyone who knows me knows that the soapbox that I stand on is specialization. I do believe that specialized agencies have an advantage, especially as we see things like AI become more of that generalist, and where agencies are going to thrive is becoming specialists, where people can come to them knowing that they don't have to explain things, they don't even need to share things, that the agency owner can come in and futurize. I call it futurizing. And what I mean by that is I've seen it with my clients where one of the biggest advantages they have is knowing how to speak the industry language. So let's take healthcare, for example. Let's say we have a agency owner who serves orthodontics. And because they know in the orthodontics world that one of the huge challenges that orthodontics have in sales and marketing is getting their treatment coordinators into the marketing. Now, treatment coordinators are the one who usually sign the sales, but treatment coordinators necessarily don't like marketing, right? And so that's something like an insider knowledge. And when an agency who is specialized can come in and speak that knowledge, speak that to the orthodontist or the business owner, then the business owner is like, wow, like they already know my business. They know it well enough that I don't even have to share with them the details. And I think that builds trust. That really closes the trust gap, because then someone feels like, oh my goodness, they know my business maybe even better than I do, which is what we want, right? That futurizing bit where you do know the business better than they do. So I do think that specialization is actually a key for growth in the agency space.
Yeah, I agree. Most agency owners know they need to specialize. Some will put their stake in the ground and they're like, I'm not specializing and blah, blah, that's totally fine. You can be successful, it's just harder. But the ones that do want to specialize, I think where they tend to get stuck is with all the different variables, all the different lines along which they can specialize, which is like, number of size of company, industry, there's the services we provide, there's all these intangibles, like we need people to get us, social mission, geography. And I think it creates a lot of hand wringing. What we tend to see work, so we think about special front of house specialization, which is like how you're packaging what you do, right? So if you go to a grocery store and you buy bread or oatmeal or anything, there could be one company that has like 5 different labels, right? And it's kind of the same thing. Like what we do, frankly, could work for any B2B service, any complex service. We focus on agencies because I come from the agency space. And like you talked about, and I'm so glad you brought that up, we've likened that to like secret languages. Like when we do outreach to agencies, we say the words new business. We don't say lead, we say prospect, because lead sounds like we're in spam land. There's a bunch of other things. The titles are different and so on. Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. I want to jump back into this conversation about trust and referrals and strategic partnerships. Now, beyond referrals, what kinds of partnerships have you seen drive long-term growth for agencies?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think we don't always know like what is going to be a great partnership. Just like to use, the cheesy comparison, just like in romance, we don't know what's going to pan out until we spend time with it. So not to just beat our own drum or give people like just one process, but I really do think the better starting point is taking stock of everybody that you know and would ask for a referral, and then seeing what actually pans out, seeing who is happy to help you, seeing like what's producing good opportunities, and then thinking about a partnership from there. That said, I think we see partnerships in unlikely places. We've seen them happen with, non-competing agencies like you're fostering in your group. Private equity can be really big. Publishers, tech companies, like tools that you're using or that others might be using, and so on.
I love the conversation about partnerships, because oftentimes when we think about partnerships, we think of one type of partnership. And I talk a lot about 9 different types of partnerships that do exist. If you understand the different types of partnerships that exist in a business, then it becomes an easier exercise of figuring out who can be good strategic partners or referral partners. And I think that's a really healthy way of looking at taking referrals into something that's scalable, because it's not just one note. There are so many different types of partnerships out there that we need to investigate. Okay, now we've both built systems to help agencies grow through trust yours through campaigns, mine through community and ecosystems. Now, if someone's listening and wondering what kind of support they need, how would you describe the kind of agency that thrives in your model?
I'd say about 70-80% of the time we're working with an owner that knows they need to own the new business function at least for a little while, even if they have plans to hire a new business person. And typically we're working with boutique agencies. Who they're selling to, the services are less important as long as it's a complex service and they're selling, relatively upmarket. So if they're selling to like med spas and pizza shops, or they need to do massive Facebook ad campaigns, that's probably not our lane, but it's usually people going kind of upmarket-ish, let's say.
I love that you've gone back to pointing out that when it comes to referrals and building referral ready relationships, it does boil back down to the agency founder or the owner still engaged in the sales function. I want to draw back to something you mentioned earlier, which was this fact that a lot of agency owners who want to grow think about hiring out their sales system. There's a lot of work that needs to be done before that sales system can be handed over. One of the key mistakes that people tend to make is thinking that they can hire someone who can figure it all out for them, when that actually has to be done in-house first, because who knows the business better if you've grown it across 5 years, 7 years? It's you, right? And you need to be able to make sure whatever you hand down, the sales system included, that you can train someone in it well. So with that understanding, what are some key things you think must be there before someone can actually hand over a sales system to someone else?
I think the first thing people want to think about the sales system is like the tools. They're like, great, what tools do I need? What lists do I need? Let's get off to the races. But the reality is the first thing that needs to be there is just kind of identity, like time, energy, motivation, and the fact of like somebody being excited and ready to be in that role. And again, it's usually in order to start out with. So it's largely emotional. It's largely somebody that's ready to build those habits. And that's the most foundational part of it. I think the next level is clarity. I think once we have somebody that has the motivation, they're ready to go, where people get stuck in the mud is back to that who are we, where are we going, who do we serve kind of thing. And if most of the business has been referrals and it's been kind of random, then the thing about outbound, and this could apply to ad funnels, it could apply to anything, is you're going to have to decide like really who is our ideal client. The good news is when you reframe outbound or referrals or whatever, if you reframe it as at least a 30% learning exercise and accept the iteration, then it becomes a lot easier. So then you're like, I'm doing this as much to learn, or at least a portion of it to learn. Then you don't get hung up with having to make all the right decisions up front. You don't have to deal with all that stress. So clarity, I think, is the next building block. And then from there, it's really the strategy. It's really the way in that we've covered already, like largely with the referral process, but that's the next thing from there, basically.
Great. And here's the last question. What's something you've changed your mind about in the last couple years when it comes to agency sales or growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the biggest one is the referral as an opportunity, right? If you're thinking about the classic SWOT analysis, I used to put it in the weakness block, and I've now moved it to the opportunity block. And I think that the things, and this is for ourselves, this is for agencies, because of AI and because of the amount of noise, I think that these old signals that are based on like our networks and our trust are going up in value. So that's great news for lots of agencies, especially the ones that have been here for a number of years, is that like there's a real opportunity to use this trust that you've built and to do it tastefully, but just put a system behind it. And I think you're doing that with your group. We're doing that with, the systems we're giving people and so on. And yeah, that's the main thing I've changed my mind about.
100%. Thank you for sharing that. I still see content out there that talks about referrals being something that is not dependable. And I think through our conversation, what's really exciting is to see you talk about making referrals something that is dependable. And I think you and I both agree you can put a system behind it and you can make it a constant strategy in an agency. So Dan, thank you for being here. Now, before we hop off, where can people find you?
Yeah, for sure. So the best place, if you just go to salesschema.com/Audrey, there'll be a video training there that covers a lot of our process and how to run this and how to think about it. And we'll get that linked up.
Very cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Hey, thanks for hanging out with me at the Small But Mighty Agency podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, it would mean the world to me if you hit the follow or subscribe button in your podcast app and share it with a friend. I'll see you on the next one.